How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how much it costs to raise chickens for eggs. I'm going to be talking about two main costs, with the first being infrastructure costs, and then the second being kind of your regular costs, such as your weekly cost, when it comes to maintaining chickens and just taking care of chickens in general. I'm not going to include the infrastructure cost into my maintenance cost because I believe that the infrastructure cost is more of an investment, and once that investment is kind of made, it's there for good. And so besides maybe replacing some boards and some small maintenance items here and there, it really doesn't affect the weekly cost of your eggs. And so what I'm going to do is just start off with infrastructure and just kind of go down a list so you can get an idea on how much you may have to pay in order to have chickens for eggs. So the first thing is going to be your chicken coop. This is the most important infrastructure cost that you're going to be spending. And you can go down to Lowe's and Home Depot and pick up a pretty cheap chicken coop. However, it is cheap, and I don't mean in a financial kind of way. It's going to be a little bit rickety, but if that is what you have to do to get started, then by all means, you can go that route. I've seen those coops going for around $200 these days, so they are a little bit expensive. We ended up picking up a 4x4 chicken coop used for $150, and this thing was very well built, 3/4 inch plywood. It had doors on it, 3x3 pressure treated footers, and so it was really a good buy for us. And it also came with an enclosure. And then later on, we ended up building a larger coop, and I went a little bit crazy with this coop. This is not something I would expect everybody to do. I had never built anything before, and so it turned out to be just kind of a bigger chicken coop, I guess, than we were expected. However, the coop itself, it was designed to the specs that I was looking for in terms of being able to support 12 to 14 chickens. But the design actually ended up including an enclosure with the chicken coop, kind of as an all-in-one, which is kind of cool. But again, you don't have to do that. I think I spent at the time a little over $1,200. So that's a little bit expensive, but you have to understand that that was during the COVID price days when lumber was double and triple. It might have actually been a little bit more than that, because I remember when we did the roofing, the tin roofing really kind of made the expense a lot more. And the reason why I put tin on it instead of shingles, which would have been cheaper, is because I want to collect rainwater, and that rainwater will just be a little bit cleaner than using shingles. However, folks, you don't have to go that far. You can find an old shed and use an old shed, right, to do this, or an old goat house or something like that. Heck, you could use a decent sized dog house technically to do something like this. And so you're looking at anywhere from free, right, on up to however much you want to spend to build something like this. I know today in 2025, you can build something for around probably $500 and get a very solid chicken coop made. So that is another route that you can take. And then for the enclosure, an enclosure is basically a fully screened in rectangular square kind of area that they can go and be able to kind of free range in that, and it's lockable, right? So that the chickens can be contained in just that enclosure. So it's separate from like their free range area or their chicken run. Now, I consider an enclosure as optional, so you don't have to spend the money to do that, but you're really just looking at a bunch of 2x4s nailed together, screwed together with some screening, again, at the top, the sides, and completely enclosed, maybe with a little door. And so our small coop did come with an enclosure. It was an 8x8 enclosure, pretty simple, made out of 2x4s. But again, optional, you don't have to do that. And then the next part is going to be, of the infrastructure, is going to be your chicken run. And this is also going to be where your chickens can free range. And this will be set up with fencing. So fencing would be your next cost. You can do a 25-foot by 25-foot free range area for $100. You can get a roll of 2x4 welded wire fencing for about $100 these days. Some places will be a little bit more. I spent well over $150 again during COVID times for some of those rolls of fencing that I got. So there is that cost that you want to keep in mind, and you can go as big as small as you want. A 25-foot by 25-foot is going to be pretty huge for 4 or 5 birds, if that's kind of what you're thinking to start off with. So you don't even have to necessarily get something that big. So again, if you can get the coop for free, or a small little shed, get some fencing, you're looking at $100 there. You really can get started at a pretty reasonable price for not a whole lot of money. And then there's going to be the other items like the water fountains. The water fountains are basically what the chickens use to get water and drink water out of. You're looking at 20, 30 bucks for an aluminum water fountain. And of course you can get fancy, go fancy. They have all these fancy gizmos you can get, but I'm not even going to include those because I think they're a complete waste of money. And then of course there's the actual feeders. If you're going to give them chicken feed, I recommend having at least one of these on hand, that especially if you live in an area that gets snow on the ground like we do here in the central western part of Virginia. We do get some standing snow from time to time, so we do have some feed as backup, and we also save all of our table scraps, and so you can really get the cost down. We're not like super habitual when it comes to the table scraps, but if push came to shove, we could create a container in our refrigerator and collect those if we really wanted to, I guess, develop some good habits around that. But, you know, you're looking at, again, 20 bucks for one of those plastic feeders, right? And you can get aluminum ones. Technically speaking, you only need to put a little bowl. You can get a dog bowl for their water, right? So you don't have to buy these kinds of things. These are just kind of convenience items that I'm including. And so the bare minimum really that you need is going to be a chicken coop that has a 1x1 area per chicken. So again, a 4x4 coop will house 4 chickens. I'm sorry, it's going to be 2x2 2 square feet per chicken. So a 4x4 will give you enough room for 4 chickens. And we actually put 5 in that 4x4 chicken coop, and it was perfectly fine. No problems there. Other infrastructure costs that maybe you have questions about that I see people asking about are heating lamps and heaters. You know, do the chickens get cold in the winter? We have seen single-digit temperatures, back-to-back single-digit temperatures here in Virginia, and our chickens were fine without it. They're very good at regulating their temperature. And the thing is if they get used to that heating lamp, then you get used to that warmth, and then your power goes out and they're stuck without that, then that's where your birds are going to have problems. So you're going to want them, let them adapt naturally and not use any kind of heating lamps. That's my recommendation. Obviously, if you're in some extreme temperature areas where you're seeing extreme negative temperatures all day, all night, maybe that's a different situation, but I can't answer that question specifically. I'm just kind of talking about the regular part of the country here. And so that's pretty much it. Again, you can get started for free if you have access to a chicken coop or something to put the chickens in. It doesn't have to be a fancy coop with a little back hinged portion where you get the eggs. It can quite literally just be like a half a shed, right? Like a 6x8 shed or an 8x8 shed or something like that. And you can just put some crates on the ground and fill them with a little bit of hay or some bedding so that they have a place to lay their eggs. I mean, you can just, it really doesn't really matter at the end of the day. It's going to be kind of what you want to do and what you feel you want to spend. But I will tell you this, the more your birds are taken care of, I really do believe the more they're going to lay and the higher quality eggs they're going to lay if they have a nice place to stay that's draft free. That way the wind doesn't get in there, and definitely making sure that they stay dry. So those are the 2 things you want to look out for. So again, for us, you know, we probably spend $1,500, $1,600 when COVID prices were around for our complete setup for infrastructure. You don't have to go that crazy. I do regret a little bit spending that kind of money, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And we ended up with a really nice chicken coop. You can see it behind me here. It's a pretty cool chicken coop, but again, a little bit overkill, right? So it is what it is. I personally learn by doing. That could be a good or bad thing, but that's just how it is for me. Now, I think the big cost that we really want to talk about here is going to be the maintenance costs. And I asked my wife, Bree, I said, hey, how much are we spending weekly? She's not feeling good today, so she's not going to be joining us. Hopefully she'll start feeling better. She's got a review she wants to do on an egg cleaner that she found. And so I think that'll be coming up here in the coming weeks. So be looking out for that video. But when it comes to maintenance costs, this is the big one, right? Once you have your infrastructure in place, how much are you going to be paying on a weekly basis for your eggs? Is it going to be more money than if you were just go to the grocery store, right? Because that's a big deal. But what it really boils down to for us is we're paying about $7 a week in maintenance. So this is going to be for feed as a supplement for them, and also bedding. Those are really the 2 main things. I think my wife also gets some deodorizer to put into the chicken coop to help keep things clean. And that's pretty much it as far as maintenance. So we're looking at, again, $7. And I did ask her if push came to shove, could we lower that, maybe even cut that in half? And she said yes. Like, you don't have to necessarily give them this kind of, really nice bedding and that kind of stuff on a regular basis. You could cut that back. You could cut their feed back too if they have a big enough area, or just supplementing their diet because we can. And the chickens are almost always going to their free range area. And so the bigger the free range area you have, the less supplements that you're going to have to give them in terms of chicken feed, right? And then of course she gets the really good organic chicken feed that we get from a local farmer. So it doesn't have any GMO stuff in it, chemicals, things like that. And we know that our chickens are getting something healthy for their supplements. So, or their supplemental feed. And again, for $7, right, with eggs going for what, $8 a dozen now, on up to $12 and $14 if you get the pasture raised, all that kind of stuff, the super organic stuff, the all natural eggs, they're going to cost you $14 a dozen in some places. So $7 a week, that's not too bad for 10 eggs a day, roughly 8 to 10, depending on how they're feeling. It's still a little bit cold out these days, but once the production really ramps up here in the spring, we'll be getting 10 eggs a day. That adds up very quickly. So you're definitely going to want to just start off with maybe 4 chickens and go from there. Make sure that you're eating those eggs. We actually had 4 chickens and we ended up still with extra eggs, because there's going to be some days where you don't eat eggs, right? We're going to have steak or whatever, hamburger and stuff like that, and different things in the morning. However, you can give them away and you can sell them. If you sell 2 dozen eggs a week for, let's just say $4 a dozen, or even $3 a dozen, you're paying for your maintenance just by selling those eggs, and you can undercut what everybody's paying for right now. Somebody out there will pay $3 or $4 for eggs that are coming from your flock, from your backyard, right? People are willing to pay that because they're going to be guaranteed almost not to have chemicals and stuff like that in them. And so again, it won't be hard to sell those, and you can use the money from that to just keep maintaining your chickens. So you can get to a point where you're not really paying anything for your eggs, quite honestly, when it comes to just, again, the regular maintenance of the chickens. So a lot of people say, oh, you'll never get your money back. You're going to spend all this money on infrastructure and the chicken coop and this and that, and it's going to cost way more. And that's just, I think, simply not true at this point. Because here's the thing, like, do farmers count their barns and their tractors in the costs per pound of their beef? I don't think they do. They have to basically be competitive in the market, so they're not going to include their property and the barns and the fencing in those costs necessarily. Now, they do need to make money to pay, if they're taking that out on loan, or to just pay that back in general. But the thing is those infrastructure costs are there, and if the farm's handed down through family or for whatever circumstance it may be, it just doesn't make sense to put those infrastructure costs in the price, right? Like, that's kind of a known thing. And so that's where that comes from when people say, oh, you can't raise chickens cheaper than getting them or for eggs cheaper than getting it at the grocery store. That's why, is they feel that they need to for some reason add the cost of the chicken coop and the fencing and stuff like that. And yeah, it'll take 20 years or whatever, right, to make up those costs, but that's an investment. And so once that's in place, it doesn't change. It's really like, what are we paying on a regular basis? And so if push comes to shove and times get tough, yeah, you can not give them feed if you have a big enough free range area. And if they have the space to go get the bugs and things like that, and they have the table scraps, or maybe you're saving some of your old vegetable scraps from your gardens, you could set it up to where you're not paying anything at all as far as maintenance goes. Again, it's really going to come down to what you want to do. Is this going to be a hobby? Is this for food? There's many different reasons why people have chickens. You just have to kind of figure out what works for you. Again, we're paying $7 a week. We're getting 4 to 5 dozen. Probably we'll get closer to 6 when they are starting to lay, those 10 solid eggs every single day. And if we add a couple more chickens to our flock to make it an even 12, then we're going to be getting a dozen eggs a day, right? So that's not too bad for $7 in maintenance a week. So that's all I got for you in this video, everybody. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.